Let's turn the microphone over to two people, starting with Patrick Spero. As I mentioned, Patrick is a fellow at the McNeil Center at the University of Pennsylvania. He specializes in early revolutionary history, particularly in Pennsylvania. And Patrick was one of our two historians who worked on the project. So let's start with Patrick.
Thank you, Jenny. Over a year ago, Jenny Clark and Pilcock asked for my help in compiling this work. For over a year, a fellow Penn PhD student, Renee Louise Alvarez, and I compiled data on the educational history of all 50 states. For me, a student of the American Revolution, I was struck by the central and yet often overlooked role education played in the political thought of the founding generation. And I cannot think of a better time than today, July 2nd, to talk about the conclusions drawn in this book. On this day, in 1776, the Continental Congress voted to declare 13 united colonies free from Britain and to begin an experiment in self-government. I think it is an opportune time to reevaluate the beliefs that went into this decision and what they can tell us today in 2008. When the delegates of Independence Hall declared themselves independent, they sought to create a government and a society without monarchy, hereditary offices, and aristocracy. It was a bold and daring vision of society, the radicalism of which we may not fully appreciate today. To quote Abraham Lincoln, it was a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Such an idea was untested before 1776. And at the time, many feared it was a recipe for anarchy, for tyranny, and for destruction. The answer to these fears was education. People across this new nation saw an educated citizenry as the bulwark against tyranny and the foundation upon which a republic could rest. Benjamin Rush, a local Philadelphian, outlined a system of education that he believed would ensure the public's permanent prosperity, peace, and tranquility. Public education itself was not enough for Rush, though. He argued that all citizens must receive equal education so that they may all equally participate in government. George Washington long advocated for a national public university in Washington, D.C., and Thomas Jefferson helped create the public education system in Virginia after the American Revolution. But it wasn't just the founding fathers that we are all familiar with that advocated for such policies. On the state and local levels, leaders made similar arguments, often eloquently and persuasively. In Georgia, as you'll read in this book, Abraham Baldwin, a member of the Georgia House of Representatives, argued that public prosperity and even existence very much depends upon suitably forming the minds. Failure to do so would result in, and I quote, evils more horrid than the wild, uncultivated state of nature. And the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 declared that, and I quote, wisdom and knowledge, diffused generally among the body of the people, was necessary for the preservation of their rights and liberties. And these rights and liberties depend on spreading the opportunities and advantages of education in the various parts of the country. Indeed, as is documented in this work, the incredible amount of political energy that went into creating and supporting schools in the early republic, from Georgia to Massachusetts, speaks to the widely shared belief that education was not just a fundamental right for citizens, but essential to securing good government. And so, on this, the anniversary of the Republic's founding, as we are inundated with the inspiring ideas of liberty, equality, and self-government, I think it is important that we remember and advocate a lost principle, the principle of equal educational opportunity, and remember that the founding generation viewed this principle as intertwined and inseparable from these other ideas. Indeed, it was perhaps more important because while government was meant to protect liberty, equality, and offer fair justice, it could only do so if an educated citizenry understood those very ideas. In short, the founding generation saw that a government that rested on the people could only be as good as those very people. And I cannot help but wonder what these founders would make of our republic today if they used our education system as their measure.